Hey, welcome everybody. And today we've got another episode of Developer Tips. And today we're talking about serializers. One of the important things to talk about serializers is the ability for you to separate out your presentation layer from the actual query that you would do from the database. And there are reasons to do that. For one thing, you might have in the raw query in your controller um, a lot of repeating information or information that you don't want to necessarily appear in your JSON response in your API. So having a serializer helps you to actually change what is presented to the user. And the user in this case is not an actual person user, but a consumable for that API. So it could be a website, it could be a mobile device, an iOS app, something like that. So here we have in Ticket Mule, which a link will be in the description, we have an example here of the ticket serializer, and a ticket has a number of plain attributes such as this ID, time type, group, etc. But it also has related resources, things like a contact and an owner and a creator, and they all have their own serializers. So if we can see in here, we can see that there are simple attributes for each of these, but there's also these meta attributes, which is essentially using functions within the model and exposing the result of executing those. Things like full name, for example, is just a concatenation of first name and last name with a space in between, but it's like a handy way of accessing the full name for the front end. And instead of having to concatenate the first name, last name every time you want to display somebody's name. So it's like a utility thing. So as I said, attributes can be the result of methods, or they can be just these simple attributes that are straight from the model. So all of these are just uh, ones that are existing on the model. And the idea is that you don't have to expose all of your model attributes. You can expose just some of them, whatever the front end might find useful to work with. And one of the main reasons why it's important to have these serializers is because you want to present the information in a way that's customizable and it's easy to understand by the developer that's working with your API. It's not confusing, it's well laid out, and so you can really change the way that the information is presented here. So as well as with Rails, there are also other frameworks which use serializers, and I'll go through a couple others briefly. One is Python with the Django REST framework, and I'll leave a link in the description below. But essentially, the REST framework has really good documentation. So it shows here how we're creating a model. Initially, this is just a simple model that links in with our database model. And then we're creating a serializer example here. And it's very similar to Django forms, essentially. So, we're essentially taking these attributes which we've created here, and we're saying that when you actually present this model, then we're going to define it um, as this, and we have different types of fields that we can use, whether it's an integer, whether it's a character, whether it's a boolean, whether it's like a list of choices, um, and we can also allow stuff to be validated as well. So very similar to a form, we can return back an instance when we've updated it, and it will. And here's some example where we're creating a new instance, and we're passing in some value to it, and then we're saving to update it, and then we're saving it. And then once we have that, we can use the simple. Once we've got a new version of this model which we're saving into the database, is what snippet save is doing, we can then serialize that instance of the ORM database object. And here we have, we're using the snippet serializer. So similarly to the Rails where we were using the ticket serializer, here we're using the snippet serializer. We're passing in that object and we're getting the data back, which gives you a simple dictionary. And then we're using the JSON renderer to basically render out that dictionary to give you back the JSON, which would what you would bring back from your controller. And that's pretty much it. It's fairly straightforward with Django. The other thing I'm going to briefly mention is Java and Jersey. With Jersey, you can it has an inbuilt way of serializing objects, but you can also create your own providers using something like JSON, for example. The advantage of JSON is that you don't have to worry about any annotations. And what you do is you write this provider which shows how, which implements these message body reader, message body writer. You register that with your application, either on a package level or individually, and then every time your endpoint serializes something over the wire, it automatically uses this to turn it into a JSON stream. And you can customize it in your custom provider in here. And so that's it. And so again, I'll leave a link in the description of this. You can see here is a get endpoint, and we're just simply creating a new object with this. And here's the health object, and it already knows how to serialize that health object because it uses the serializer in the background. So, and then it just just gives you that at the end. So again, you can do things in your serializer like serialize dates, present dates a certain way, all sorts of things. So that's briefly what serializers are about. I hope you found this video useful, and like and subscribe.